Hi, my name is Lee and I'm the creator of CLIQD Pattern Kits. Today I'm going to show you how to create an open back dress using CLIQD's one dart fitted dress kit. In the kit you'll find a block which we'll use as the base for our pattern and an A5 guide. The guide is broken down into 4 stages with step-by-step instructions to create a pattern for any design based on the one dart fitted dress block. So let's get started. The first stage is to make a plan. Follow the instructions in the guide and draw your design over the block outline on the A4 sheet, which you can find in the kit envelope. Your sketch doesn't have to be perfect. The idea is to help you think through your design so you can work out what changes you need to make to the block. So I need to lengthen the side seam to the floor, straighten the hem. I don't need the block sleeve or collar pieces. I also need to add a slit to the center back seam and drape the back section. Now I'll flip over the page and list all the changes in the order I need to make them. I'll also need to redraw the neckline so it's big enough to fit the wearer's head through without an opening. And I'm going to drop the armhole and bring it in a bit for a more relaxed fit. So these are all the changes I need to make to turn the block into this design. So let's start making them. The next stage in the guide helps you build your base. The first 2 steps show you how to customize the block to your sample size. The size 10 block is pretty close to my measurements, so I'm going to skip these steps and head to step 3. Step 3 helps you decide whether you want to use flat pattern cutting or draping to create your pattern. I know I want to drape the back, so I'll head to step 4 and start toiling my block. The first step is to grab the block from the kit envelope and cut out all the pieces. You should have 5 pieces. I don't need the sleeve or collar pieces for this design, so I'll put them back in the envelope. Before I cut the block pieces in calico to make my toile, I'm going to lengthen the front and back patterns. You can use these standard measurements, which you can find in the CLIQD guide, or measure your own body if you're making the dress for yourself. And my waist to floor measurement is 110 centimeters. To lengthen the hem, place your measuring tape at the waist and measure down along the hip curve to your floor measurement. Remember to trace the front pattern on the fold so you have both sides of the pattern too. Extend the side seam to your floor measurement and draw a straight line between the 2 points to create the hem. Don't forget to add some notches along the side seam too. Do the same thing on the back. You can also add a slit to the center back. I'm starting the slit about 55 centimeters from the waist. Amazing! So we've done 3 of the changes already. Now, cut the front and back pieces in calico and sew them together. And we're ready to start draping. I'll start by redrawing the neckline and armhole. I want the neckline to stay pretty high and close to the neck, but I need it to be at least 60 centimeters wide so it can fit over the wearer's head without an opening. Now I can start drawing the back lines. I'm using a vanishing marker, but I really wish I had Chopin designer tape. It's so much quicker and easier to draft lines using Chopin tape. You should definitely get some. And you can see I'm trying to use my measuring tape instead. I'm not sure about these lines, so I'm going to remove the toile and quickly cut out the back section I've drafted. So it's looking pretty good. I'm just going to adjust the lines a bit, then I'll pin out any excess and mark it with a pen. If your design has a cutout section, there will usually be some excess that you need to pin and remove on your pattern. You can find more info on contouring in the CLIQD guide if you need help with your design. And I'm done. Now, let's transfer the drape to my pattern. My drape isn't too complicated, so the lines I've drawn will be enough. But if your drape is complicated, there is a whole section in the guide dedicated to successfully marking and removing drapes. Plus, it will show you how to create sewing instructions for drapes. Let's start with the front. I'll grab my pattern piece and pin the draped fabric to it and trace the lines. I'll then remove the fabric and draw the new neck and armhole. I'll then fold the pattern along the center and trace the lines to the other side. Then I'll do the same on the back. I only have one back pattern piece because I cut the toile as a pair, so I'm going to flip the pattern over so I can trace both sides of the toile onto the pattern piece. I'll then draw the lines. To remove the excess, I'll simply close the wedge shape. The dart on the upper back is pretty small now, so I can get away with closing it too. Now I can create the upper back pattern. I'll need to put the centre back on the fold so I can trace both sides. I'll then draw the lines. When I removed the excess, it made a point at the side seam, so I want to redraw the line so it's nice and smooth here. Then I'm going to check that I'm happy with the shape of the neckline and armhole by pinning the shoulder seams together. I'll also check that the shoulder seams are the same length and double check the neck circumference is more than 60 centimeters. I'll then add a 1 centimeter seam allowance to the neckline and armhole on the front and back patterns. I'm also reducing the shoulder seam to 1 centimeter. The block has 2 centimeter seam allowances to give you more room to adjust when fitting. But now that the pattern is finished, I'm going to trim the seam to 1 centimeter. I'll then add 1 centimeter seams to the rest of the upper back pattern. I've also moved the original shoulder notch on the block so it marks where the wrap stops. Make sure you update the front shoulder notch too. They need to match. This pattern piece is done, so I just need to cut it out and label it. I'm calling the pattern upper back and writing cut 1 pair self for the cutting instructions. For the lower back, I'll grab the back pattern that I traced my draped fabric on and just cut along the top edge. You can see I've already added a seam allowance along the edge. I'll then draw an arrowed line and write zip next to it on the centre back, and I'll rub out any lines I don't need. I'll also fold the dart to check the lines look nice when it's closed, and I'll draw the grain line and label the pattern lower back and write cut 1 pair self. And don't forget to add a notch where the lower back finishes on the front and upper back pattern. And we're done. Before I start celebrating, I'll double check all my notches and seams match. The upper back should finish at the dart end on the front pattern. If your seams don't match, the guide shows you how to correct them and which seams should be at a 90-degree angle. The self fabric for this dress is a light nylon mesh, so I'm going to do a 2 centimeter double fold hem. And then I'll use the Find My Finishes guide to find the best finishes for my design. I'll then write the finishes on my pattern and draw an arrowed line from the top of the slit down towards the hem and write slit open next to it. I also need to create a lining pattern for the dress because the self is transparent. I know working out linings can be tricky, so I promise to go through linings in a future video. In the meantime, the guide has everything you need to create your own lining and facing patterns. Finally, my pattern is finished. I'll then send it to my sample machinist and it's done. Working from a tried and tested block like this one makes it so much quicker and easier to create a pattern. Plus, you can use these kits again and again to create different designs. Head to CLIQ's website, CLIQDPatternKits.com, and select the kit closest to your design to get started.